Welcome to One Bite is Everything, the podcast where we uncover what you don't know about your food. And a lot of times that means seeing the bigger picture. In today's story, we head to a Georgia ranch to find some natural solutions for skincare that connects to your burger, carbon sequestration, family dynamics, and the economic viability of a multi-generational business. Knowing more like this can help you have a big impact on your own health, your community, and the planet through tiny informed choices. You'll see. I'm your host, DiPrima. Today, rancher Avery Rigglesworth of Lily Hill Cattle joins us not only to introduce you to the latest in natural skincare, brought to you by her herd of pasture-raised cattle, but also to the complexities of family business and her unusual journey from aspiring ballerina to dedicated rancher. We'll dive into the world of tallow, its benefits, and how Avery turned a personal skincare solution into a thriving business. We'll also explore the challenges and rewards of running a family farm and the importance of sustainable agricultural practices. But that's not all. We'll also explore the significant challenges that Avery faces in managing family dynamics to keep their farm running. This struggle is all too common among family farms nationwide, where intergenerational conflicts and financial pressures can threaten the very survival of these vital agricultural businesses. So sit back and get ready for an insightful conversation that highlights the resilience and innovation at the heart of farming today. We're going to get to all of these issues, but we're going to start with the skincare business.
So tallow is a type of rendered fat, generally from a ruminant animal. So tallow is going to be from sheep or cattle or any other ruminant, even deer.
A ruminant animal is essentially an herbivore, or an animal that eats grasses and plants that has more than one stomach. So they eat, and then they ferment, and then it goes into another stomach.
So it is different when you see lard, that's going to be from pigs. So it is different. They're not interchangeable either. You're going to want to start with the suet or the kidney fat of the animal, especially if you're going to be rendering it for cosmetic purposes. That's a much higher fat, and that fat is designed to cushion the organs of the animal. So you're going to want to use that, and you essentially go through a rendering process, which is a purification process where you kind of separate all those protein solids from the fat and oil and get it into a purified form.
So it's really inner fat that we're used to seeing like on the side of a steak.
So that is still considered tallow. You can use trimmings to make tallow, but in general, when we're speaking about tallow for cosmetic purposes, it should be made from the suet, the leaf fat, or the kidney fat of the animal. Those are all the same thing. They're just different names.
Suet is a type of raw, hard fat that comes from around the kidneys and loins of cattle, sheep, and other animals. It has a high melting point and is prized for its ability to create a flaky texture in pastries and pies. Suet is often used in traditional British cooking for dishes such as Christmas pudding, suet pudding, and mincemeat. It can also be rendered into tallow through the process of melting and straining out impurities. So you harvest that out of the animal, and then what happens?
So then you generally are going to want to process it into, chop it into smaller pieces or have it ground. Some processors will do that for you. And there's two different rendering methods. I prefer the wet render. So you're going to put it on low heat. Some people use a crock pot or a stove or just any large cooking pot. And for the wet rendering, you're going to add water into it, and you're going to let it simmer around 200, a little over 200 degrees Fahrenheit for probably around 8 hours for that first render. And that's really going to break down that fat and allow you to be able to strain it and remove all that connective tissue and the little proteins from the fat. And in a dry render, you do it pretty much the same way, you just don't add any water.
And you prefer the water process?
Yes, I find it just really makes a little bit cleaner product. And the dry render, you can have an issue with some of the solids. They essentially fry in that oil. And so you get a stronger smell, more like a beefy smell. So I prefer the wet rendering. I think you have a better, higher quality product at the end.
What inspired you to start doing this?
Well, originally I kind of had gotten some of the leaf fat or the suet back, and I had just had it in my freezer, and I hadn't really decided what I was going to do with it. I was maybe going to render it down for cooking. But then I started struggling with some eczema on my hands, and I started reading a lot of benefits about tallow for eczema. So I was like, oh, well, maybe, I'll give it a go and I'll render this down and see how it works for me. And it's been the only thing that has actually been able to keep my eczema moisturized and really help my skin heal. Now, I do have to be conscious of other factors, like if I'm out helping with the hay and stuff and I get a lot of debris on my hands, I need to make sure I wash that because that can aggravate my skin and cause flare-ups. But the tallow has definitely helped me so much in, soothing my eczema and starting to heal from it. And then I gave some to my sister and my mom, and they're like, this is great. Like, you should try just selling a little bit of it. And so I started getting all of the suet back from all of the cattle that we process for our beef. And I started from there, just small little batches selling it. And it really just started to take off. So
That's amazing. And so how are you marketing it? Like, where are you getting your customers?
Well, I mainly market on Instagram, and then I do have like my newsletter group that I send out emails quite often. And I think there were some reviews on TikTok. I never found them, but I got some people messaging me saying, oh, there was like an unboxing of this on TikTok, and that's how I heard about you, but I still haven't found them. I'm like, if anyone sees it, send it to me. But I think that kind of took off and I wasn't aware of it. And so I had a huge increase of orders. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm trying to keep up, but it's all been good things. It's just trying to figure out how to grow the business now and scale it and maintain quality.
So mostly, is it just you making this product?
Yes, so it's just me. And I do have Ashley who helps us with fulfillment for the beef business. Actually, she packs all the tallow orders for me right now as well, but she also helps me ship beef. She helps me with some of the prep work and chopping up the tallow, preparing it for the rendering. But I am still very much kind of a control freak in a way, and I don't trust anyone else to make it just yet. So I am the only one currently doing the combining and making the final product.
So first you're rendering it, and then you add an oil, and it's whipped, is it not?
Yes. So after you render it, you basically then, and it's been separated from the water, you melt that back down, and that's when you add in that type of carrier oil. So that's where I use the jojoba, or some people use olive oil or argan or anything really like that. So a softer oil that kind of softens the tallow a little bit. And then once those two oils reharden, combined, that's when you then whip it. And that's when I add in any essential oils as well, because I don't want to add
a mixer.
Yeah, I still just do it with a hand mixer, but it might be time, depending on what route I go, I probably invest in a bigger stand mixer, but those things are expensive.
Yeah.
The industrial sized ones.
And basically you're getting your tallow out there and telling people about it, and you sell out like real quick.
Yes. So I did a poll a while back on whether or not people would prefer for me to keep tallow orders open and just, people understand that they might have to wait 2 weeks for their tallow as I'm making it to order, and people preferred that. So I try to keep it available on the website unless I have a whole bunch of orders come in, then sometimes I'll sell it out. But like right now I'm about 200 jars behind. So I have like always that thing to catch up on.
Right. So, what are you doing this weekend, Avery?
I'm making tallow every weekend.
All right. Well, let's start with the reality here, because you can't make tallow unless you have this fat, and yours is coming from cattle. And so you're a rancher. So tell me about your cattle ranching business.
Yeah, so we originally moved back in 2019 to take over the farm, and we originally were a cow-calf operation. So that's where you just sell the weaned calves off of the mothers to feedlots. But we transitioned into a direct-to-consumer ranch. So now we raise all of those cattle all the way up until harvest. And we have a local processor where we take our cattle and then we bring the beef back and we ship it out direct from the farm or sell it locally. And my dad had implemented a lot of the rotational grazing system before we moved back. So that's something we've just improved upon and we're really working on increasing the stocking density of our pastures so we can really boost that soil health even more.
What is a stocking density?
So that's the amount of cattle we're grazing like per acre. And we still have a ways to go to get that where I would like, but we are improving it. So we're basically just downsizing the pasture sizes gradually, and they get moved every single day. And every time you add a new pasture, that gives all the other pastures more time to rest. And also, the smaller the grazing size, the more impact you have because the distribution of manure is more concentrated.
Yeah. And have you seen a big difference in your fields as you've done that?
Yes. So the ones that we have definitely been focusing on, we've seen a lot of improvement. And I would even just go out and throw out some clover seeds by hand. And so it's been really interesting to see those spread.
Clovers are highly nutritious for cattle where they provide high levels of protein and essential minerals and are also very palatable to cattle, making them a preferred forage. Clovers also have the ability to fix nitrogen from the atmosphere, enriching the soil and reducing the need for synthetic fertilizers. This can improve the overall quality of the pasture. Clovers can also withstand droughts, improve soil structure and fertility, and can help prevent soil erosion, maintaining the integrity of the grazing land and contributing to healthier and more productive grazing lands.
Over 20 acres, one bag of seeds that I just threw out with some cups. So that's been an interesting journey. It just shows if you take care of it, you allow those plants to grow seed out, that they will, you don't have to ride around in a tractor and overseed necessarily. You can do some really small things that have big impacts.
So this is your family farm that you grew up on and then you moved away and you came back. Tell me your story.
Yes. Originally, I was going to pursue a career in classical ballet, but I had Graves' disease, which is hyperthyroidism, and it really affected the strength of my muscles and my endurance. So I ended up having some chronic injuries as well as a result of that. So I decided I wasn't going to pursue dance. And my dad was like, okay, well, I'll pay for a couple months for you to go traveling. I don't want you just sitting here at home wallowing and loathing about your dream that didn't work out. Young adults, it was hard, but I'm thankful that he gave me that opportunity because I do think it's important to travel if you can. Yeah, I think you do learn a lot by visiting other cultures.
Where did you go?
So I ended up on the island of Jersey. If anyone knows the Jersey dairy cow, this is where they originated from. So it is a little island off the coast of France, but it is a crown dependency, so it's part of England, so they speak English. So you have Guernsey and Jersey side by side, so both the Guernsey cow and the Jersey cow, that's the islands they come from.
You can take the girl off the ranch. When she travels, she goes and visits some cows.
I know, there's all these pictures of us like standing in front of the Jerseys, and they have all those old farmhouses and like milk parlors. Like there's just so much history from the dairy world there that it's quite interesting to be exposed to that. But it's also an offshore finance center. So I ended up going into finance, and I also met my now husband there as well. So worked 3 years in finance, and then finally we got the call from my dad, either going to have to sell the farm unless you're interested in coming back, really can't make it work anymore financially, we're going to lose it. So he gave us the opportunity to come back and invest if we wanted to. And so we were like, we'll be there. Give us a month.
I know a lot of farms really struggle in the transition between generations. And sometimes there isn't a yes when the farmer calls their kids. So tell me what happened then.
Yeah, so it was a really big decision for us. And my husband, unfortunately, he had lost his father, but had also inherited a little bit of money. And we were able to step in financially to also support the farm, because if we hadn't been in that position, I think it would have been a much different story, because the farm was very close to foreclosure. It was in forbearance, but my dad wasn't able to really uphold the forbearance payments how they had originally agreed. So we stepped in and made some of those payments and took over the farm to start, hopefully turn it around and get it back up profitable.
And do you know why it was struggling? Like, what was going on that it wasn't financially viable at that time? It had been around for some time, working fine, and then what happened?
So my father had expanded the farm, and he did purchase it from his father. He didn't inherit it. He purchased a small section, and then he also added in quite a good number of acres. And I think that really it came down to the fact that the farm as a business wasn't able to really pay off the mortgage. The cattle industry and cattle prices, it just wasn't able to carry enough cattle to really produce enough calves to sell at market to sustainably pay off the mortgage. And so it got into a little bit of a bad cycle where my dad ended up selling off some of the breeding herd to make some short-term payments, and that becomes a vicious cycle, because in the next year you have even fewer cows calving out, so it just kind of snowballs. And I think it was a lot of economic pressure. I think maybe looking back, there are some things that my dad knew he would have done differently, but I think it was just kind of unfortunate circumstances and some economic pressure as well.
Calving out essentially means giving birth. It's a term commonly used on farms and ranches. Effective management of the breeding herd ensures a higher rate of successful calvings, healthier calves, and overall better productivity and profitability for the cattle operation. So you guys come back, and you, fortunately, with an unfortunate circumstance, have some money in your pocket that you can invest in the farm to help out. So what happens then?
Yes, so that's when the intergenerational struggles started to happen. And, he was really struggling to hand over the reins to us. And it wasn't that he was against us switching over to direct to consumer or the retail beef, but I think he was skeptical of it and how successful it was going to be, because also our first year, we wanted to do 120 cows direct, which is a huge jump, and you have to find your market. And I think he was worried about that, but I was like, we can do it, Dad. Just let me give it a shot.
And were you successful?
Yeah, so we didn't do quite 120, and part of that was definitely a learning curve, figuring out when those cattle were going to be finished and hit their target weights. But we were close, and I was pretty proud and also surprised that we were able to do it, and we've just continued to scale since then.
And what year are you in now?
We started the direct-to-consumer August of 2022, so we're like 2 years.
Wow. Now, I'm just curious, your dad was the one who was in charge of the farm before. Did you guys not want to work together on the farm?
He wasn't so much involved in the day-to-day manual labor. We have a farmhand that's worked for us for over 30 years and did most of the day-to-day work. And my dad had other companies as well. He's also a lawyer. So I think he was always very used to being in a position of power, and he liked to be the boss man, and I think that was really hard for Mark and I, because we kind of felt like hired help when we moved back, and we didn't quite feel like it was a collaboration or a partnership. So I think that's a lot of where like the butting heads happened. And for those first couple years, we weren't pulling a salary or anything. We were living off of Mark's inheritance. So it's not like we were even getting compensated. I mean, we were more than happy to do it, but the proposal was we were going to come back and help run the farm and collaborate and transition and not be like hired help.
And now where does it stand?
Well, so right now my dad has given us space, and we took actually some legal action due to some turn of events where my dad eventually, after 3 years of us being back, he decided that because of us butting heads so much, he's like, well, I think I'm going to parcel up some of the farm and sell it now. I think I'm done with it. And so that was really hard for us. We just transitioned into selling our beef direct. And now all of a sudden, my father wanted to now sell the farm, and especially the part of the farm that we rely on very much to run our operations with all of the infrastructure. It's very complicated. I'm trying to be careful about what I share at the moment, but it's a similar situation that a lot of families go through. And what was hard for us was really the fact that we felt a little bit used. We made the payments on the mortgage for several years. And now my dad wanted to turn around, parcel it up, and sell it off and not compensate us either. When we made the mortgage payments, they were also structured as loans. And my dad tried to argue that he didn't necessarily owe us that full amount back.
Now, looking back on all of this from where you're sitting now, are there some points in this story where things could have gone differently or you wish they could have?
I think that even when you're going into business with family, I think you need to have agreements in place. Everything really needs to be formalized and clear cut. Even though we did have those loan notes, my dad had drafted them and he's a lawyer, and I don't think we had proper representation really. And I think that even if it is a family farm, I think to avoid some of this miscommunication and things like that, everyone's roles really need to be set out before everyone comes back. If the farm does start becoming profitable again, how does that money get distributed? And if you are loaning the farm money, how does that get paid back? Do you get compensated eventually if you try to purchase it in some sort of way, or actually paid back in funds? So I think just having more formalized agreements and more discussions up front could have really helped.
And where do you think you go from here?
Well, I hope that we can clear up all of this and that we can, continue to run the operation and continue to grow it as we envisioned and as we would like. But I think that eventually some parts of the farm are going to be sold. My dad's made it pretty clear that he wants to get rid of some of these sections, even though we are using them. But that's okay. We'll adapt and we'll figure out how to run our operation with a little bit less grazing. It's not ideal, but we'll be able to manage.
Is he willing to sell it to you?
So there is a section that we're currently trying to purchase. And the issue was that, yes, if he parcels it up, he can get a lot more per acre. But obviously, we're not going to be able to afford to buy it in 20 different parcels at $20,000 an acre. The business cannot afford that. He basically said that we weren't offering enough. He could get more for the land. So that's where our struggle is, because we don't want it given to us. We've been actively trying to purchase it for the past 2 years, at least a section of it. And it's been hard because he doesn't want to offset the improvements we've made, because also another thing, don't ever build structures on land that you don't have 100% ownership in. But we were just so excited in the beginning. We were like, we need a hay barn, because he had no hay barn or anything. It was like, that would really help our feeding quality in the winter. So we got that put up, and then also a cover over the cattle working facility, because in Georgia in the summertime, it is so hot and it's not fair for those cattle to have to stand in, the metal chutes and tubs. Just little things like that he wasn't willing to compensate us for if we were to purchase it. And I guess rightfully so, he doesn't have to, but we basically increased the value of the land and he wanted us to pay for that again. There were some big mistakes on our part, obviously, but you just don't expect your father to treat you quite like that. And money becomes so incredibly important that he can't envision the future, what we're trying to achieve.
Family ordeals are stressful, but it's all tied up. Your family business and your family heritage. How long has your family been there?
So my grandfather bought the original section in, I believe it was 1960 60s. But part of the section that he had bought, he actually had basically repurchased some old historical land that the Mallory family had purchased back in like the 1700s. It kind of made a full circle. I'm third generation on this farm, but there's a history of cattle ranching in our family. So I'm fifth generation rancher, but third generation on the farm.
So when you left Georgia, where did you go for ballet?
Nashville Ballet. I just did it. They call them trainees, and it's like preparing you to dance in the company. And that's kind of was my last stop when I really felt like I started having the health issues. But I did a lot of summer intensive as well with American Ballet Theater, Harry Conservatory. I did when I was younger, which is actually in Florida. I think they only select like, I don't know, 60 or 80 dancers out of the whole US to train there. So I had some really great opportunities growing up to pursue my dance career.
Are you able to dance anymore? Like, is that something that you do?
I have my moments where I might, in private, do a little something. Yeah. But honestly, we've just been so busy here. I would love to take back up maybe some classes just to like move my body some and stay a little bit active. But that's something I want to do once I have a little bit more time.
Right now,
we're not 7 days a week flat out. So
yeah, tell me what your day's like.
They kind of vary depending on what day it is. So Monday and Tuesday, and just recently Wednesday, those are more like my office days, and then also the days that we ship beef. And Tuesdays we generally do the most, but we can't start too early because we don't want the frozen beef sitting out of the freezer too long, and they get picked up at the end of the day. So we normally start around 10 a.m. and then we go until UPS shows up. So we might take like a 10-minute break and we pack all day. And then whatever we have left, we pack on Wednesday. And Mondays, we do shipping prep. Ashley does all the tallow orders for me. And I try to get caught up on emails and maybe plan some content like social media content, maybe for the rest of the week. And then Thursdays, Fridays are definitely my favorite days. They're more like my free days, and that's when I get to really go back out check on everything on the farm, see how the cattle are doing. Mars takes care of pretty much everything Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for me. And also I'll look at the finishing steers. I'll select the next ones for harvest. I like to walk those off myself and take a good look at everyone. And it's really my day to catch up and see what's going on the farm and things like that. And then Saturday, Sunday, Mark and I do all the chores out here as well. And I try to make as much tallow as possible Saturdays and Sundays. But it's been a transition for me as the retail business has grown, because I've had to step back from some of the ranching operation aspects, which I'm hoping if we make some changes, especially with the tallow and things like that, that I'll be able to step back in to doing a little bit more of those, because that's really where my passion lies and where I think I feel best. It's not that I don't love making tallow. It's just, it's something I can outsource, whereas the ranching and really seeing how I want the operation to grow and different changes we want to make, I think I'm better suited making some of those decisions.
And what was your experience like when you were younger on the farm? Were you involved?
So I don't think my dad anticipated me ever coming back to take over the farm. I was always at dance class and things like that. I did do some horseback riding lessons and various things, but my sister was the equestrian of the family and also lived in Montana and was a chef for a while. And I think he always envisioned her being the one that would come back and take over the farm. So I was mainly focused on ballet and really trying to pursue that. But I did spend every weekend out here getting exposure, and I had some awareness to what was going on. I didn't know the intricacies of necessarily running a ranch, but I think you're exposed to more than you think, even just being out here, even if, I wasn't necessarily on a tractor raking hay and things like that.
And your sister, what is she doing?
So she's actually now a nurse. So it wasn't what was expected to
Surprise!
happen.
So in your first year, your goal was 120 cattle to process and sell direct. And didn't quite hit that number, but you were close enough that you were pretty viable. And now where are you?
So we're just a little over 120, but that's for this year. And that was really limited because that was the number of cattle we held back to process. But next year, we're just now going through the numbers and trying to figure out what we want to do, what we can manage. We're going to have to probably invest in a bigger freezer because we're kind of limited right now with storage capacity. Even though we turn the beef around fairly quickly, there'll be like maybe 5 days we'll have before we ship out where we can only fit so much in the freezer.
And the tallow is like a supplemental business. So you're just being very creative with the product that you have coming from your cows.
Yes. So I didn't really anticipate it to become a standalone business. So it really was just a way for us to utilize more of the animal and then, yes, just be a supplemental product to the beef business. But I think that I've seen a little bit of potential in it, so I would like to see what we could do. And obviously, as we grow the beef business, I'm getting more and more product back to make tallow with, so I'll be able to scale that as well. But I'm sure there'll be a point where that's all we have. And then we'll have to look at sourcing from other local farms. How do we want to do that? Right now, it's not an issue, but we'll come to that hurdle if that ever happens.
And if you weren't making tallow out of those parts of the cow, they would be waste?
Yes. So some processors will maybe resell them or some of them just throw them away. I've seen how much product I've been able to make out of it. And it is very rewarding to know that this would have all just gone to waste if I hadn't chosen to do this.
And about how much tallow comes out of one cow?
It depends on the cow, but you're probably looking at like 25 pounds off half. So like 50 pounds of tallow, I think. It might be less. It might be more like 30. I've never actually added up the exact amount. I haven't gotten to the point where I'm like, I need to make sure I'm going to have enough. I've had plenty.
So just on the social media, I mean, it's really been a really good selling tool. You're able to sell your beef. You've been able to introduce the tallow product and sell that. I see that you share lots of facts about the state of the union in terms of what's going on with farming, and also a little bit of the story between you and your dad.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of toxic positivity, and I could very easily just act like we had a fairy tale story, but I just don't find it very relatable. And I think a lot of other multi-generational farmers go through these struggles. And I do get a lot of messages like, you know, I'm so glad I'm not alone. And they'll tell me their stories. And it's kind of eerie in a way how common it is. It's heartbreaking to know that so many other farmers have to go through these situations. And I really think it is, you know, the farm is being run by one family and then that generation comes back and then you have to figure out how that one farm can support 2 generations. And that's very difficult. And those farms, most of the time, they're going to have to change or it's just not going to work out. Especially with the margins today, with how farmers are doing, making an income, it's just not enough really to sustain multiple families.
And selling direct, you're able to get more of the money for yourself from your product than a middleman or whatever you want to call it.
Yes. And I mean, our processing expenses are a lot more. And obviously, it just costs us more to produce it than the processors just really have scale on their side. But I think the most empowering thing is that it allows for farmers to set the price that makes sense for their operation. And I think that's something that consumers should also be aware that you are going to see a lot of different price variations from farm to farm and region to region. And just because one farmer can produce their beef at a certain price doesn't mean that other farmer can. You know, they might have the land paid off and have minimal carrying cost and things like that versus other farms that had maybe just purchased a piece of land and have a mortgage, and it depends on your region and also how you're raising your cattle as well. So the consumer just needs to understand that there's going to be some variation in the prices and how farmers price it, and it's a way for them to be sustainable and actually gain back control over how they can make their operations profitable.
It's just so important to figure out how we can bridge all of that messaging between consumers.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like struggling with social media as well. There's a really fine line between like fear mongering and, so that's why I really try to stay away from the health, like you need to eat our beef because it's going to be nutritionally superior and things like that, because I know our beef is expensive and I don't want people to feel like buying beef from the grocery store that they can afford is somehow wrong or dangerous. And I'm like also just seeing it with the tallow stuff as well. Like all the commercial cosmetics are toxic, like you're going to die if you use them. And I'm starting to kind of be like, well, maybe we should just talk about the fact that tallow is a great option because it actually works and it's just a really great moisturizer. And so I think we need to also be like a little bit conscious about how we're messaging, just because I don't think we need to be bombarding the consumer with more like worry and things about the safety of like the food industry or things like that. I do think the quality is a lot better direct from a rancher. And I think if you want to invest in beef that is fully traceable and is better quality, I think direct from a rancher is 100% the way to go. And it is sad the way that the labeling requirements, the way that we've set it up in the US, it's pretty sad. The consumer cannot drive demand for US beef in the grocery store. There's just no way for them to do that right now. And it really allows that manipulation at the packer level to just import meat, bring down prices, and not have to source direct from US ranchers because the consumer can't drive the demand for US beef because there is no labeling requirements.
Right, until 2026 now, right?
And even then, the label's going to be optional. So they don't even have to label anything. But at least they can't label beef as a product of the US if it was raised in like Tasmania or something.
I really feel like consumers deserve the truth.
Yeah, just let us choose. Obviously, there's just something wrong with the beef industry. We've seen a spike in beef prices right now, and ranchers are getting paid much more, but that was because of economic pressure. Like, why does something crazy in the beef industry have to happen for ranchers to get paid decent prices? Right. They might stay high, but inflation's kind of risen to the point where they're not really even making that much more, even though they're getting paid more for their beef.
And is that because of the drought a few years ago that we had less cows born, or?
Yeah, and I think it was the drought and then the natural cattle cycle that the industry goes through, but I think it was just like a combination of things. And so, yeah, there definitely is a shortage, but I guess we just have to wait to see if those numbers start coming back up. And then I think the industry will know, is this kind of just a normal trend that was more extreme, or is this actually going to start to become more of a serious issue? Because I do think the landscape is changing for agriculture, and we're just seeing a lot of farmers just dropping like flies. So I think we just have to wait and see what the cattle industry is going to do, because cyclically it will go through troughs and peaks, but this one was quite extreme.
What do you hope is going to happen in the next year or so?
I hope that we can resolve a lot of this family drama and really start to make a difference here in our community, be able to focus on our farm, building a community around us, whether that be on social media and locally. And I just really hope that I have maybe made a difference to a couple people by sharing my story. It's definitely been hard. I don't mean to cry about it, but it's been a really tough year. So hoping sunnier, better days in the future. And I think we'll be just fine. But we just got to keep adapting and rolling with the punches. So
yeah. Do you think you and your dad are ever going to have an opportunity to repair this? Not so much the farm or the ranch, but your relation?
I think we'll be fine. Like superficially, I'm okay with him. Like I'll still tell him like I love him, and he's my dad. He'll always be my dad. But I think that I'll definitely never do business with him again. But the only thing I'll take away from it is at least he taught me some really hard lessons, and it might really help me in the future when it comes to our business. And it taught me how to kind of adapt and also fight for what you believe in.
And that wraps up today's episode of One Bite is Everything. A huge thank you to Avery Rigglesworth for sharing her very personal story and valuable insights with us. Like many of the farmers behind the food and products you know, she's turned challenges into opportunities and continues to innovate in both farming and value-added products. Avery's story also sheds light on the critical issue of family dynamics in farming, a challenge that many family farms across the country face. These farms are the backbone of our agricultural system, and addressing these struggles is essential for their survival and success. If you want to learn more about Avery and her products, be sure to check out Lily Hill Cattle on Instagram and sign up for her newsletter. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. I would love it if you could give it 5 stars in your podcast app and write a little review that will draw in new listeners just like you. And if you haven't already, subscribe or follow the show in the same app you're listening in. If you would like a personal announcement and brief summary of new episodes as they come out, check the show notes for a link to subscribe, and I'll pop a note into your inbox. Once again, thank you for being here for another episode of One Bite is Everything, the podcast that uncovers what you don't know about your food and connects it to the bigger picture relating to your health, communities, the economy, and the planet. I am your host, Dana DiPrima, and I will see you right here for another episode next week. Until then, stay curious, my friend.